Hello.
Hello. I'm going to give it like 2 minutes for anybody coming in late. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everybody. It is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. This is the SIG Multicluster meeting. Before I open the agenda, since this is the first meeting after KubeCon EU, I wanted to give people a chance to introduce themselves, since often we have some new folks showing up after that. So I will go first, and then if anybody wants to, feel free to jump in after that. We can spend a few minutes doing that. My name is Laura Lorenz. I work at Google on GKE. I've been a member of the SIG for maybe like 4 years now. I'm actually subbing in today for our co-chairs who are not here today, both of whom are still traveling after KubeCon EU, Jeremy Olmsted-Thompson and Stephen Kitt from Google and Red Hat, respectively. So if you come through another time, you'll probably see them running this meeting and me just hanging out. So yeah, does anybody else want to introduce themselves before we get into the agenda?
Hey, I have been on this call before, I think a few times, but I know some of your faces already. I'm over at Apple doing some looking into a lot of the multi-cluster things that we've got going on, and yeah, building out our multi-cluster scheduling, control plane, API related tips.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, no, go next. Hello, everyone.
think we're talking like with many of you, especially at KubeCon. I'm also out at Apple, like working on Kubernetes and multi-cluster stuff here.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
I've been invited by Stephen as well. I work with him at Red. I work actually on an open source project called Scupper. So yeah, nice to meet you guys.
Thanks.
I can go next. My name is Ravi. Again, I work with James and Andrea at Apple. And I'm interested in the multi-cluster scheduling space.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and I'm working on a multi-cluster space in Azure. I think I met some of you guys from Apple during the KubeCon, and some other guys in this call.
I can go next. So I'm Arthur. I'm interested in MCS API, and I'm working on the Selenium implementation. And yeah, I think it's been roughly a year since I'm here. Nice to meet the new folks.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm Shashank. I'm working at Apple as well, alongside James and Andrea, and we'll be lurking around for now to explore more of how this is going to help me with our work on cluster as a service. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
All right, going once, going twice. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started on the agenda. Ryan, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm on my phone, so I'm still
Okay.
roaming around somewhere in London.
I'll
I
share
think
for you, by the way.
that'd be great. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. This is a pretty short one because I don't know if everybody has seen this app. This PR yet. So I think I mentioned this. We have a few talks during the KubeCon about the cluster profile APIs and what's the next step for them. So we have two big ticket items there. One is trying to formalize some of the properties in this cluster APIs. I know I've met some folks in KubeCon that have pretty strong opinions on that. So we welcome you to give input into that, see what is needed or not. So please, hopefully you can take a look at this PR and give maybe even completely different comments on this PR, on things like that. Other one is the secret credential part that is missing. That is really a core part of how we can make cluster profile API actually center of all the universe, basically, all the different APIs, different projects like Argo CD, MultiQ. I think MultiQ probably is interesting for Apple, as far as I know. We're going to have Corentin probably is not here, but we probably will get together and get some ideas and write up something in the next few meetings. And again, hopefully we get more involvement so that we can actually get to something that community actually really can support. Yeah, that's about it. The link is in the doc, is in this meeting's doc. So hopefully everybody know where to find this link. If you have any questions now, I can try to answer those. If not, we are good. We just can comment on PRs. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks. Any questions, comments? Okay, cool. Let's continue to have the conversation on this PR. I think we've talked about it in the past some too. But for those of you who are new, this this PR kind of has a lot of different stuff in it, but it's a good place that we can have sort of the discussion and put some stuff in for posterity, even if we kind of split it up some more later or whatnot, because it's addressing both some suggested new properties to kind of elevate as standards in cluster profile, each of which individually might want to be discussed, and then also the process to do that type of elevation in the future. Okay.
Just one thing. I think I met a Adobe guy who exactly wants something like that. So I will forward this to Adobe and see. Hopefully they will come next time, because they specifically told me that they are looking for something that they can see for user or for admin to know what clusters are in the fleet and what are some of the properties it has. I don't know exactly why they need that, but that's exactly what they are looking for. So this probably is something they will be interested. So hopefully they will have more concrete input for this appeal.
Cool. All right. If there aren't any other questions or comments, quarantine is actually on the agenda, but not in the meeting. But unless somebody else wants to pop in with any more context,
Yeah, I can. I think.
Yeah.
I added this to the agenda because this has been there for a while. I think again, yes, from February. So one of the reasons I think we would like to get to weekly instead of bi-weekly was trying to get some PRs get merged a little bit faster. So this is another PR. I think we got a few rounds of polling. Actually, our SIG is famous for having polling for names, and we run one, and so I think this does have a majority of the community support at that time. Hopefully, we could get another round of eyes from whoever can approve this or review this, so that we could get this either merged or at least get more feedback to improve.
Cool. Yeah, and to give this a little bit more, even more context, thank you, Ryan. But for, again, people who might be new, there are a number of projects in the SIG of which there are KEPs, like the MCS API or the cluster profile API, that don't necessarily specifically say what the thing is that might be orchestrating the multi-cluster situation. This position statement, similar to another position statement that has been made in the past by SIG-MC, are like general framework concepts or definitions that sort of describe how we think about some concept. Cluster set, which is one, or namespace sameness specifically, rather, is a position statement that has been held in the same sort of style in this repo to try and keep all of our conversations around the same thing. This one in particular is about if you do have something that is like running management over running some sort of process that has management and insight over a collection of clusters. If that thing is itself a Kubernetes cluster, what are some factors about that? That it's open in a lot of our other KEPs of what that thing actually is. If it's actually another Kubernetes cluster, if it's some other type of server process, some sort of cloud process, if it's literally just somebody like typing in kubectl commands in the basement all night. So that's the purpose, or that's kind of like the context of why this position statement might help unify us around what do we want to have to say, or how can we explain in the context of a Kubernetes cluster being that thing, like what is the position of the SIG. So please put in your comments if you feel like that is a thing that you need or want, or if we could all have a shared definition of that, it would make it easier for us to communicate. Please have a look and throw in your thoughts. Thanks again, Ryan, for giving some of the flav as well. All right. Any questions or comments on that one? All right. Arthur, you have the floor now.
Yeah, so bit complicated topic, but basically you probably can connect in most implementation, I guess, like dual stack cluster with single stack cluster. And I was trying to think about what we should do about it in MCS API, and if we should even have like something written in the CAP that implementation should do. Because right now there is nothing. And well, I guess if an implementation like properly implement like the dual stack in a dual stack cluster, you could have something like you have an, I don't know, IPv4 only clusters, and you have some pod exporting there, and in the dual stack cluster, your pods might connect from IPv6 or something, and maybe they won't be able to reach those IPv4 pods that you are exporting in your single stack cluster. So I don't really know what we should do about it. I made some rough proposal here, but I don't know if we should be super strict about it and trying to have a common ground for everything that where you should be able to target every pods, or if you should be loose about it. Like it's fine if you just treat, I don't know, half of your pods or something. Yeah, I don't know if you folks have opinion on that.
I have an opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the first, I think in the order of like priority, I think the first thing is that we should try and extend the behavior of dual stack in a single cluster situation. That is like the first priority. So if there's something that we can interpret from like how this is defined from like SIG networks perspective, from like a single cluster, I think we need to fall in line with anything of that. I don't know for sure if there's anything concrete about that, or if it's even like necessarily extendable. But I think that's like the place that we should start from. There is the only time we like kind of mention about dual stack in the CAP is like where we're like, we'll do whatever SIG network does for dual stack, which this definitely needs to be updated, I think, because at the time that this little, I put the link in the chat, but at the time that this little blurb was there, that was like when everything was still being negotiated for dual stack in the first place on the SIG network side. So I think 100% there's an avenue to like kind of update that, figure out what like how we can extend what is normal practice now, and then update the CAP with that. Besides that, I would lean towards that this is like an implementation detail or implementation specific. There's other aspects of like topology or routing that we've talked about in the past that we have more often kind of relegated to that. It's implementation specific. Obviously, there's some intersection points with Gateway API that have made that like more complicated. I know certain individual implementations implement their own type of like whether they're round robining or if they're doing something more intelligent. So I think this could fit in that same category as well. So those are my like first impressions.
Okay, I see. So, but like, so basically the implementation should choose if they want to act in some strict way or some loose way, basically.
Yeah, or I don't think it's necessarily the position of the KEP to define which of these two. It should be beyond whatever may have already been established from like a single cluster routing perspective in SIG network. But yeah, that's my opinion.
And should we, but even if like it's not like strictly defined, should we add some field to help towards the strict? For instance, I don't know, adding the address family on service import or something like that. That like may not be used by every implementation, but I'm not sure if it's really needed, but just rambling around.
I remember this being like the rationale for changing IPs to limit 2, because that was going to like mirror IPv6 on service. Does that ring a bell?
Kinda, yeah, actually.
Sorry, you lagged at the beginning, so I didn't understood everything.
Just I remember part of the discussion before where we were looking at the IPs field. I forget if it was on service export or import.
Oh yeah.
But it's the array, and we were going to change the length from 1 to 2 because that was going to mirror the behavior on service.
Yeah. So yeah, before it was limited to 1, now it's limited to 2. So technically, an implementation can like advertise dual stack things. But now, what if some cluster are single stack? That's the point.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Like they can advertise dual stack IP, but now if you if a single stack cluster exports some pods, some services, how it should react if the dual stack peoples connect to the service, but not in the wrong stack for the single stack cluster. For
Yeah.
instance.
So I would expect that it would be the responsibility of whatever controllers that create in the service import to, if the stacking workloads in that cluster are single stack, then only expose a like single stack IP. If like that's all the implementation is for. Yeah. So I think this is something that is an implementation concern for like whatever is acting as the controller, rather than something that should be configured by a user in any way.
Oh yeah, but well, for instance, even in a like single cluster, just dual stack, should we try to mimic the service configuration, because they can like do a different couple of configuration, like do IPv6 first, do IPv4 only, do IPv6 only. There is like I don't know, it's probably 5 or 6 options there. I don't know how to come, but
Yeah, and like some of this is tricky because it also like depends on some of the implementation details. Like if you're inside your cluster, you're single stack, but you have like an east-west gateway at the edge that can handle dual stack incoming and then translate it to whatever inside the cluster. Then like the endpoints that you expose would be dual stack. I think it's probably worth having some conformance around this, just to like make like to help guide implementations to making decisions that make sense. But I'm not sure how much we want to directly leak out from the service. I know that we're doing that for a few fields that are configured on the service already. But I just think we should be careful about that.
Yeah. I'm fine
Just
like
curious.
being also go ahead.
There's some maybe probably dumb question I haven't really thought through. So if the can export, just follow whatever the service it's exported. For example, if the service has dual stack, just export dual stack. Does it really need a different one on the service export side? Why not just follow whatever service is, and it's the field is already on the service side? What's the downside of that approach? I haven't thought through, so I'm just curious.
I think it would be more on the service import side that we should perhaps add a field, but I'm not entirely sure.
It depends to some extent on your architecture, because like it's different. Like if you're exposing your pods directly on the same network, versus if you're exposing them like through a gateway or something like that. Like there's a lot of like behavior that is or architecture that's intentionally outside the scope of what MCS defines that could have implications for like what makes sense and what works.
Yeah, exactly. So how? Yeah, I cannot think through how can the export side create something to facilitate that. As you said, most of them seems to be very implementation wise restrictions or details. And it depends on very specific settings of that cluster. An import is created by the controller, right? So like after if you would like to do it, what type of fields of restrictions you would like to put onto the service import side, like put a IP family there?
I don't really know, to be honest, because on Cilium we are not in the gateway case. It's very flat network basically.
Yep.
And I don't even know if we want to do this loosely, and like it's fine if you do not address every pod, or strictly and we like do this intersection, and if you cannot have at least one IP services when IP services when you import, it fails or something. I totally don't know.
I think what I would like to see here at least is really just like some basic conformance around if a service import ends up with an IPv6 address on it, then it should work. If it ends up with a IPv4 address on it, then it should work. If it has both should work. And the decision point about whether or which or how many of those addresses are written on the service import is kind of the responsibility of the controller, I think. That's
Yeah,
my initial thought on it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But what are you really? Well, if you do this in the conformances, it should have like an equivalent definition in the cap then.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's the part that Laura was saying of like, now that we know what the like Kubernetes like single cluster implementation looks like, we can probably start to define this a bit better.
And then how? What would you expect to have in the cap? Kinda like, should we? I don't know. Should we try to advertise dual stack whenever the cluster is dual stack and the implementation is okay with it? Should there be like,
I think
should it try to match the service?
I think that can be an implementation specific decision. I don't think that we have to prescribe that behavior because that may vary by architecture. I think just we want to just really like prescribe like the UX of like, this is the field that IPs end up in. They can be IPv4, IPv6, or one of each. And if it is programmed into there, then it works. and I think like anything inside of that or its relationship to the underlying exported service, I think that can be intentionally like opaque to MCS, and MCS like probably shouldn't care about that from the perspective of like the cap or conformance.
But if we do that, the IP family field on an exported service can be just like ignored in some way. But we could just say instead something like the implementation should read those, but just as a suggestion, not something mandatory. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, we can certainly describe that like a service in the like the existing IPv6 single cluster behavior of like a service will advertise one or more IPs on which it may be reached inside the cluster, and like that's for a flat network case, if you have a like large single network, like it's reasonable that those might be the same, but we don't want to enforce that because that's not always going to be the case.
No. But I don't mean this. Like basically you have this IP family on the service. If you export that, like the controller can read it as a suggestion. Like for instance, if your gateway or whatever only support IPv4, and on the service you have IPv4, IPv6 family, you will just end up with IPv4 on the exported.
Yes,
Basically, or something
I
like that.
think that is something that we should support, and like that's fine and good if a controller decides to do that.
Yeah, but
I don't think that we necessarily. I guess something that like the mechanism for doing that is okay for it to be implementation specific or implicit even in some implementations.
Yeah, but if it's implicit, it means that some implementation will totally disregard that. For instance, us, we totally disregard us. So
I don't think it's so much disregard as may implement differently. And really just as long as we have like the outer boundary of like if the IP exists on the service import that is created, then it should work. And I think that's really the limit of what we want to be able to test.
Yeah, and I do think at least that is right now implied in the KEP in the sense that the VIP is like by definition supposed to be like routable to the endpoints that make up that service in other parts of the cluster, like other parts of the cluster set. But I think we can be more explicit about that, especially like in the section about dual stack, that's like a property that both of those need to meet.
Yeah, and like in a like as an example of how this can vary by architecture, like if you have a service that exists in one cluster of a 3-cluster set and it's exported from that one and it's imported in the other two, the IP addresses on those service imports might be different. They might be the same. They could be the same but different than the cluster internal address. So there's a few ways where I think that we just want to be careful about like prescribing too much. But yeah, I'm happy to like take a deeper look in this. If there's like a specific like implementation concern for like the cellular perspective or something that you want some eyes on and some maybe workshopping around like how we can solve the problem that you're trying to deal with. That sounds like a good follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, implementation specific sounds fine, but I think we should really write like something like the controller should read at the IP family and take it as a suggestion on whatever he wants to do as implementation or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure how much further we can, like, do we feel that that is not already addressed by the fact that the service import, like IPs field can have both IPv6 and IPv4? Like, are we not already advertising those suggestions?
I don't think that we're explicit anywhere
Okay.
yet. So that I think that could be I think exactly like what language gets in there is something that we can like go into more nuance on, but clarifying something there might be helpful. I agree.
Yeah. Okay, I will try to write something.
Yeah, I think for now it sounds like more or less implementation detail, like in the sense of like the strict loose kind of like, you know, certainly on like the strict side, like we don't feel like we need to be prescriptive about that. It does sound like something connecting the dots more between like that work that advertised more about having more than one cluster VIP available in the IPs field, plus like the existing work from like dual stack and SIG network, and the fact that like that advertisement like is some information that the controller can then use to like take as a hint of like what is available. I think some sort of language in there is something that we can add on. So Arthur, if you want to take a stab at that or like talk about it some more in upcoming meetings or in the Slack, then I think that would be great if we could get sort of some language to start at. That's like kind of from there, but you know, actually written down.
Yeah, I will try to do this.
Cool. And I'm happy to help review that, and I might be able to like sketch out some diagrams to better explain some of the stuff I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and also Arthur, as Mike was kind of mentioning before, if there's something specific, like a specific case that you've run into with like the Cilium implementation and wants more eyes on that, or to like describe that in more detail, I think that also might help make this concrete for everybody too, either now or later.
I mean, it's mostly that I was assuming that if you create a service in a dual stack cluster, it would be dual stack by default, but it's actually single stack. So we didn't do much with our DRI services implementation. So I was just surprised about it. I thought it was working in a loose way, like right now, but it doesn't. So yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
All right. Any other comments, questions, etc. about dual stack in MCS API? Okay, we are at the end of our agenda. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to mention? Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Some other just other quick note, this was mentioned at KubeCon in the EU, and it's kind of obvious in the sense that there's a meeting happening right now. But this meeting has been changed from bi-weekly to weekly. There's some chatter about how to make either one of those or something be more APAC friendly. I know that there's some interest in that. There's a number of people who are in the multi-cluster space who just, you know, can't make this time because they're in China or something like that. So I don't think we've totally finalized exactly what that entails. If I know there's a bunch of examples in other SIGs of people having a liaison between them or some other way to do a handoff or a sync, or just having two different times. So I think we'll be experimenting with that as time goes on. If you have an opinion or have somebody in the APAC time zone who's dying to come to SIG Multicluster and has a strong opinion about that, please DM, or not even just DM, but you can just post in the SIG Multicluster Slack channel and give us some ideas about how we can make that more friendly. And that's it. Thanks for coming, everybody, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, thanks, y'all.